All right, I am back, and I think I should be working now. I had to do what every person in the world does when something doesn't work, and that's restart. I don't know what was going on with the audio before, but I could just not get it to work on StreamYard, but in the system, it was working. So it looks, looks like the audio is coming through. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate that. So let me share my screen and get back to talking about what I was talking about before. So spring office hours, episode 1, off to a great start. But so DaShaun and I have been working on this for a couple of months now, just playing around with the idea of an office hours type TV show. And, we've just been doing it on our personal channels. And as of last week, we got it added to the Tanzu TV portfolio. So if you go up to Tanzu TV and go to Spring Office Hours, you will see a list of episodes there. Let's mute that. And we got a little bit of a meta going on, but that is office hours. So right now we are doing this Monday morning, but this doesn't really work out great for all time zones. So we'll try and add some episodes. The idea behind this really is, it's DaShaun and I, and DaShaun will be joining us soon. He's just on an engagement right now, so he can't be here at this moment. But the idea behind this really is that anybody can kind of jump in on this show because we have a pretty good format. And that format is, we'll go through some of the news of what's happening in the spring world. We'll go through some demos. We may show off something that we talked about in the news or just something that, we worked on last week. And we'll also answer questions. So we'll answer questions from the chat, but we're also coming up with a good way for you to go ahead and submit questions outside of this show in another forum that we can kind of come back to. One of the things that we see happening is, the same question being asked a couple times. And what we want to do is really go in depth into that answer, talk about it, discuss it, on the show, show some code off, and then be able to kind of point people back to that if that question comes up again. So we're working on some things there. We're working on some branding things. I don't know if you've noticed, we have some graphics. Kind of threw those together last week, working on getting some things together for kind of the stream. So those are all things coming. This is 001. We are out of beta. We are kind of in production now, and this will only get better. So sorry for the audio issues this morning. So what I want to do is actually the first thing that we are going to do in each of these shows is kind of jump into the news. I want to start here on calendar.spring.io. If you weren't aware that this existed, we keep pushing this because I don't think everybody knows it's there. This is just a calendar to kind of tell you what is coming in the spring world, what releases are planned. And so this is a good place to start. So here we are on Monday the 9th, and we can see what we have coming this week. So we have Reactor Core, Reactor Netty releases tomorrow, a whole bunch of Micrometer on Wednesday, along with Spring Framework 5.3.2.0, as well as Spring Framework 6.0 Milestone 4. So great to see Spring Framework 6 moving right along, which, again, will be released later this year. So that's looking good. We have some Spring LDAP on Thursday and some new Spring Data 2021.2.0. We have the release, and then the 2022 M3, the milestone 3. So some really cool things coming in Spring Data that we'll want to check out. Also, if you didn't know, this is kind of the calendar view. You can always switch to a list view here if you want to look at it this way. I'm excited about next week. We'll get into it next week more, and we'll talk more about it. But one of the things that I've been working more and more with lately is GraphQL, and specifically Spring for GraphQL. Awesome milestone coming next week with 1.0 that will coincide with Spring Boot 2.7 being released next week on Thursday. So just a real big week next week. I'm really looking forward to that. So make sure you join us next week. We'll have some stuff around that. So that's the calendar. I want to jump into the blog. Actually, let me come back here. And I want to take a look at a couple things. The first is this article by my coworker and friend, Greg Turnquist. So if you want to go ahead and take a look at this. Ever wanted to rewrite a query in Spring Data JPA? This is really cool stuff. By the way, if you're here, make sure you have some coffee. This is my second cup today. I have two very young kids, so they keep me up a lot. And while we're all sitting here, if you got some questions, get them in, and we'll make sure we get to them today. So this is really cool. I'm not going to read this word by word, but this is coming in the 3.0.0 snapshot and targeted for the next milestone release. So and maybe Greg will correct me on this, but I think this is coming here in this milestone release, if I read that right. But what you want to do is you now have the ability to get your hands on the query right before it's sent to the entity manager, and you can basically rewrite it if you need to. So as he says here, that is, you can make some last minute alterations. So here we have a repository that extends the JPA repository. We have a query here. This first number one is a query. This is a native query, so we're just using native SQL. In the second one, we're using JPA, but both of them have this thing called a query rewriter. And so that query rewriter is pointing to a class. This is myQueryRewriter.class. And this is, I think he mentions it. Yeah, we'll get to that in a second. So one is native query, two is JPQL. Here is the class myQueryRewriter. It implements query rewriter. And in here, it rewrites something. So all it's doing is rewriting the original user alias. So we have original user alias here in both of them. And it's rewriting to a different alias, rewritten user alias. Greg even mentions here, okay, this one is a tad bit contrived. We're basically changing the name of the particular query's alias, but you can really do anything you think of. This hook gives you a chance to change a little or a lot. The other thing you need to make sure of is the myQueryRewriter is in the application context. This means that you can use one of Spring's component-based annotations like component or repository, if that makes sense, or service, whatever makes sense in that case. Or you can use an app bean method inside of an app configuration class. So important to note there. But wait, there's more. You can also write your query rewriter as a separate bean. It's possible to put it right inside the repository where it's being used. So in this case, he has repository extends JPA repository and the query rewriter. So that's that same interface from before. And now what we're doing is, in this case, instead of having a separate class, that my repository is right here because this is my repository, and we're overriding that rewrite method. So pretty cool stuff. Fair warning, it's possible you may need more than one rewriter based on exactly what you're doing. Spring Data JPA supports not only Spring's application context, but CDI-based environments. So I had just read this morning, so this is kind of new to me as well. So I'll need some time to go through this and run, a couple scenarios. I'm curious to know if folks start using this and you start finding situations for this, what kind of situations this may come up in. Again, I haven't really thought about it. I'm just kind of finding this feature now. So really, I would really be interested to see what folks start using this for. And if you do, please go ahead and send something my way. And I'll get some demos out there to kind of show this off. This is pretty cool. Again, just being able to have access to it. I think there were a bunch of scenarios coming up where, different people wanted to manipulate different things. So this kind of gives you just unfiltered access to that query to change it before it gets sent off to the entity manager. So pretty cool stuff here. Thanks, Greg, for writing this article. We'll go ahead and get this added to the show notes. And I think that's, I think I want to talk about that too. I think one of the things that we'll do is, I've been on their Tanzu TV shows before, and we've kind of we've had an idea of what we are going to do beforehand. So we'd write up like an episode page. This for me is more like a podcast in the sense that we don't know where the conversation is going to go. We don't know. We have an idea, but we don't know. So I think I may start adding show notes to these episode pages so that you don't have to worry about finding the links or finding the code as we're going through this. You can always come back to the episode pages. So I'll check with DaShaun on that. I don't want to put my foot in my mouth there and have us doing something that we shouldn't be doing, but I think that's what we'll do. So there's that. The other thing here on the blog is This Week in Spring by Josh, my coworker Josh Long. Everybody knows Josh. He writes up the This Week in Spring every week and then has a This Month in Spring. And this is really just a great collection of things that are going on. So one of those in here was Greg's article that we just talked about. I want to focus on this one here. Josh says, I love this thread from our own Ben Hale on why Loom serves reactive programming but doesn't moot it. So this actually came up on another show that they were doing on Thursday. If you go to the Cloud Native crew, let's just click on it here. There is a show on Thursday that was with Ben Hale. So Ben Hale joined the Cloud Native crew, and there was a really great discussion on a lot of things. And one of the things that I was hoping they'd get to was this. And let's see if we can open this up in Twitter. And here we go. So if you don't know, Ben Hale works here at VMware, technical lead for VMware Tanzu, developer experience. He's a creator of BuildPacks.io, R2DBC, just a really smart guy, knows a lot about everything, especially everything here in kind of the cloud native world. So there's this thread going on, and I'll let you, again, read through this. I want to save a little bit of this. Yes, let me throw that up there. That was a great conversation last Thursday, Alex. I completely agree. Anytime you get to listen to Cora and Josh and Ben talk, it's going to be a good day. So, yeah, that was great. If you didn't check it out, go ahead and check it out. I want to leave this, like I said, a little bit for maybe when DaShaun comes back so we can talk about this together. But Project Loom has been marked for Java 19, at least experimental. And so a lot of people are asking the same questions that I had, which was, does Project Loom now replace reactive programming in Spring? And Ben has a really good thread here and says, I think this is confusing the problem with the servlet API, which is basically connection per thread, and the overhead of threads in general in the servlet API world. The fact that Netty can do what it does without Loom, because it serves multiple connections with a single thread, indicates that the problem isn't just the weight of the threads, right? With Loom, you don't solve any of the major concurrency problems of threads. You still have to deal with all the same locking, race conditions, etc., that plague concurrent programming today. You just have way more threads for problems to manifest in, which is a great point. Reactive, really just the functional part, aims to eliminate those problems wholesale by making a message passing system. Since data travels along the stream and has no side effects, you can safely manipulate data without locking overhead and without race conditions. So really, really interesting thread here. Just again on that, people are going to start asking, does Loom replace Reactive? And I think the answer is unequivocally no, it does not. They are both solving different problems. And so it's really important to understand what problem each of them is solving so you know when to reach for the right one. We got some time though. Like I said, Loom is just going into experimental mode in 19, which I don't know when the date of is. 18 just came out, so probably 5.5 months or so from now. So that's interesting. I like that. What else do we have on here? Spring Tools 4.14.1 was released. Our good friends over at Spring Cloud AWS. To simplify contributing to Spring Cloud AWS, we added the Gitpod button that launches a VS Code-based Gitpod environment configured to work with Java and Spring. So that's really cool. Thank you for that. And I think that's it. That's all I wanted to cover on the blog. Okay, so we've gone through kind of what's new in the world of Spring, caught up on some news. At this point, I think what I'll do is go into a demo, and we'll do this until DaShaun joins us, and then we can have a little bit of a discussion on some of the things we talked about. So please, if you're still here in the stream, go ahead and add some questions in there. If you have any questions, we'll get to them soon. All right, so what I want to talk about this morning is a video that I've done on my YouTube channel. So if you're a subscriber to my YouTube channel, this isn't going to be interesting because you might have already seen it, but I know I don't have everyone as a subscriber. So if you want to be a subscriber, some of the best places you can find me is over at danvega.dev, and on the bottom, I have all these social links. So you can always click over here and click on YouTube. What I'm going to talk about this morning is default values for configuration properties. So we'll talk through, we're just going to create a simple project here. We'll talk about configuration properties, how we set them up, and then how we can set some default values. So we're going to choose Maven and Java, and we're going to just use the latest stable version. So I'm going to say dev.danvega, and this is going to be a greeting service, and we'll use Java 17. And we'll need a couple dependencies. We're going to use web, and we're also going to use the configuration processor. So anytime that you need to create like a configuration properties, this will help generate metadata for that. It gives you that code completion when you're typing in application.properties and you start typing something, it kind of gives you that code assist. So we'll make sure we want to have that as a dependency. So we're going to go ahead and click generate. And what I'm going to do is open this up in IntelliJ. I'm just unzipping it on another screen here, and I'm going to drag it into IntelliJ. Ooh, an update for GitHub Copilot. If anybody's seen any of my videos, one of the most comments I ever get in there has nothing to do with what I'm doing on screen. It's, hey, what is that cool extension doing over there? That's GitHub Copilot. Probably going to replace me one day. Not you, but me. Just seems to know everything that I intend on doing. So we have our greeting service here. If you know me, one thing I like to do is just come in and run this application, make sure that everything is working as is before we go ahead and write some code. And it is. So let's talk about this. When we go into resources in application.properties, we know that like as we start typing, we get this IntelliSense saying, hey, here, you type server, here are some properties that you may want to configure that start with server. And then I go, oh, I start typing port, and it goes, here's a few more. And now we can go ahead and configure server.port to say something like 8085. And if we go ahead and rerun this, so before it was running on 8080 by default, if we were to run this, it's running on 8085. So nothing new to everyone here, right? But those properties, those server properties, are in a class that is marked with @configuration properties. And so we can write our own configuration properties. So in this greeting service, I want to write a property that says like greeting.salutation is hello, right? That is what we want the salutation to be. But as you know, there is no greeting.salutation. There is no property right now of that. So how can we make it so that this can be a property that other people can configure? And so where do we do that? Oh, I think my buddy's coming on. I heard a bing.
Hello. I'm here.
How's it going? How are you?
It's good. I'm good. Life is good. Server showing
We
up
were
late.
just.
I got started.
Oh, don't worry. I had my own problems. I had no audio for the first couple minutes, but you'll have that.
Oh yeah.
Cool. Yeah, so we just went through some news. I do have some things we can chat about after this, but I was just going through a demo here and showing off. So creating your own configuration properties in Spring, and then how to set a default value. So I said I did a video on this on YouTube, but not everybody's subscribed. I don't know why. So I'm showing this off to them.
All right. Well, I'm here.
All right, cool. Thanks, DaShaun. So we need to set up a way for people to configure a property called greeting.salutation. So in here, I'm going to create a new Java class, and we're going to call this greeting properties. And in here, we're going ahead and mark this as a configuration properties. And it's going to say, hey, you need a prefix here. So when we said greeting.salutation, greeting is our prefix. So we're going to say, all right, greeting is our prefix. We already have that, so we don't care about that. So that's one side of it. The other side of it is in our greeting service application. We just need to go ahead and say we need to enable configuration properties. You can enable it everywhere, or we can just say, hey, we have this one particular class that we're enabling it for, so you don't have to go search for them, and that should be it as far as that goes. So normally the way that I would set up a greetings properties is I'd come in here and say I have a string called salutation. I would create a getter and a setter for salutation, and that would be that. So now if I go ahead, no, this still is not going to work. So if we come in here and say greeting, and the reason is that metadata is not in here yet. But if we come back up here and we build our application, now that it has everything that it needs, you should see let's not in there. I had the same problem in my video. So let's delete the target directory. Let's run a build. And now let's hope it's there. There it is. So now we have this meta inf directory. And you'll see this spring-configuration-metadata. So now you'll see that it has the class in here that we're created our property in, and then it has an array of properties. We only have one property, but it has a name, a type, and a source type. So we know that it's a string, and we know where it's coming from. So we can also add some information to this. So if we wanted to say, this is the greeting salutation. Let's go ahead and build this. And you see there's one more line in there now. We also have a description so that when we give some information here in application.properties, it'll show up. So as we start typing greeting, you'll see that now this shows up. So greeting.salutation, and then this is the greeting salutation, is that description that kind of helps somebody when they're trying to configure your application. So I'm going to say hello is our greeting. I'm just looking. I thought I saw a question come up. Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna answer that offline.
Okay.
An example, and we'll come back to
Okay. Perfect. Cool. Okay. So now that we have that default salutation, which is hello, we want to go ahead and use it. So I'm going to go ahead and create a Java class. We're going to call this greeting controller. And in here, this is going to be a REST controller. And we'll go ahead and configure a get mapping for just home. So we'll say public string home, and we want to return a message. So that message is going to be the salutation plus, we'll just say my name. Now we need to get the salutation. So let's go ahead and get a instance of our greetings properties. So I'll say private final greetings properties. And we'll go ahead and use constructor injection to get that. And now in here, I can say greeting properties dot get salutation. And if we go ahead and run this now, should be able to come over here and go to localhost 8080. And there is our greeting that says hello, Dan. So we've all probably seen something similar to this before. But now here's a problem. What if somebody doesn't configure this? So let's take this out. Let's rerun this. And if we run this again, we get null Dan. So we don't want null Dan. Probably want some default value for this if this isn't configured. So there's a couple ways to do this. The first way I want to talk about is here in the class. So I'll just kind of tease this out. We're going to do this in both a class and a record type. I love records. I use them wherever I can. So you can also do this in a record, but let's do this here first in this. So I'm going to leave the property here, the private string salutation. Oh, wow. I didn't even spell that right. It is what it is. Let's fix that. Salutation. And we're going to get rid of these anyways. Well, at least the setter. So if we want to set a default value, we actually have to do it. We have to use this class as an immutable class, and we're going to do that through the constructor. So if we go ahead and create a constructor and we take in a string salutation, we'll just want to make sure we also have a getter for this. Now this is basically an immutable class. Once it's created, it can't be changed. So how do we get this? So there's two parts of this. First, we have to tell our configuration properties that when you set this value, you're not going to call a setter. I actually want to call a constructor to do that. And to do that, you're going to use the constructor binding annotation. And again, if we jump in there, all that says is that this can be used for configuration properties, should be bound using constructor arguments rather than calling the setters. So far, so good. And then finally, right here, we're going to use the default value annotation. And I'm going to go ahead and use my little wave emoji. And we'll say wave hello. So now if nothing is set, I want you to use this. Now let's go ahead and run this again. Remember, this is still commented out. Oh, yep. So this is going to change. And let's run this again. Okay, so now if we go back to the browser, we should get our default value with the wave emoji. Cool. So now if nobody sets that value, we have a default value. So I said that you can do this in the class using the constructor binding. We can also do this in a record. So I'm going to call this a record. I am going to get rid of all of this. I'm going to get rid of this. And we're just going to say string salutation. And we'll use that same default value annotation. And we'll do a little wave. And that is all we need here. We're going to have to update the greeting controller. This is just going to be salutation now. Hold on. Default value string salutation public record. That is a record. What did I do? Oh, that's why. Okay. All right, so now let's go ahead and run this again. And again, the output should be the same. We have that wave, hello Dan, because that is the default value. But if we come in here and just say hi and rerun this, then we just have hello Dan. Oh, no. Greeting dot. Did I not save that? Wonder why that is. Oh, I know why. So it's other wrong last time, Dan. All right, so let's rerun this again, and this should be hello. All right, perfect. So really, that's all I wanted to show off. Pretty simple, but a default value for a configuration property. And you can do this in both a class using constructor binding, and you can do it here in a record. This is so easy. I love records. They're so clean. So just another reason to be advancing on Java here. You should be on Java 16 or later. I'm in Java 17. Get to use records right here in our application. So I think that's really all I had to share with this. Go back over here. Cool. I'm going to bring DaShaun back in, and let me take away this screen. There we go. Cool.
How's
it going?
About publishing their JSON schema for OpenAPI or Swagger docs. And I'm pretty sure you've done this in an example before. And I'm going to just talk about some of the patterns that I've used in the past. There was, and it's been a while, there was a library that I found, that Spring Fox library that would automatically kind of pull out your RESTful endpoints and publish those. I've used that in the past, but I feel like there's a newer way of doing that. My default was always to use the Spring Boot docs, like with the ASCII or ASCII doctor extensions, and have it publish my API based on my tests. And I think that'd probably be a good example to show here. But I think what we're looking for is like that idea of, hey, I've got a schema, whether it's generated or not, I want to publish that and make it available. So when I publish new version of my greeting service, I want to have, hey, here's the schema, here's how you consume it. Because then, as a lot of people are doing, they're generating the client based on that contract that's been published. There's a lot of ways to do that, but I wanted to talk about it. I didn't find a great example. I was looking for one of yours.
So I don't have a demo of this, but I can talk through what we've done in the past. So, you know, in an enterprise world, we were using Swagger Hub Enterprise. So, you know, if you run Swagger Hub on your local machine, you have your API docs of what your API looks like. Swagger Hub Enterprise is really just the same, but you know, a hosted version somewhere so that different teams can post their APIs. And there's like one central place for everybody to kind of consume those APIs. So there are two ways to go about this. One is API first contracts, and then one is, hey, we've already developed the service, let's generate the API, the Swagger Hub docs. So this is all using Open API now. We used YAML, so we would actually write all the YAML out for the Open API because we can't generate it yet. We haven't written code for it. We would generate this this YAML and post it up because, as you said, now we're telling other teams this is what our API looks like. This is the contract that we're running with. So if you want to start developing your code against this, that's fine. And then what we would do once we got into production, you could put a lot of, especially with, Swagger, you can add annotations everywhere that kind of allow you to generate this documentation so you don't have to keep writing it or updating it yourselves. And then we would take that, generate that documentation or generate that YAML, and then again just post that in the Swagger Hub Enterprise UI so that other teams can see it.
And I didn't use Swagger UI. I was using the Spring Cloud Gateway as a way of filtering access to the API documentation, right? That's something maybe I don't want the public to see. So I was using Spring Cloud Gateway that sat in front of everything. And then I would also have it handle the authorizations to viewing those documentation. And then I could also, today with Spring Cloud Gateway, I can set up different patterns on top of those gateways or on top of those APIs. So, hey, not only do I have an API that's sitting back here, here's the documentation to consume it, but in the Spring Cloud Gateway, I can also configure rate limiting for different clients. So I can say, hey, team 1 can access that at 20 requests per second. Team 2, they can access it at 100 requests per second, and I would do everything through that Spring Cloud Gateway, and that's something that you can do with the open source version. And the paid for version actually has this concept of an API gateway provided. That's very similar.
Well, yeah, great question, Cloud Surfer. And then I think, we're just kind of talking about our own experiences with that. So to kind of give you a better answer, I guess I would really need to know a little bit more of how you're using it, what you're trying to do with it. So you can either post that here, shoot us something, and maybe we can come up with a demo for another show. But yeah, thanks for the question. Swagger Enterprise available. What?
We have Twitter handles. Our Twitter handles are right there. Bring that question with as much detail as you care to share. Bring it to the Twitter community if you're there.
Yep. Swagger Enterprise available on AWS also. I'm not sure of that. Again, this is something that I have experience with in 2 like Fortune 50 companies, and this was all like hosted on their service. So this is a good question. Is a record better than Lombok? And so I'm not going to say better, but if you're using Java 16 or higher, then it's already there. So you don't have to pull in an external dependency. And I don't know why people get so angry. People get angry with me when I don't use Lombok. And 10 years ago, I was using Lombok for everything I could. But after working, especially in a demo environment, working with students on different projects, I just found that if they weren't set up for Lombok, because you have to enable it in whatever IDE you're using. So that's just like one more step. You have to enable the annotation, processing inside the IDE. Yeah, it's just one more step. I have nothing against Lombok. People think I am out to get Lombok. I think it's a great project. But if you're using Java 16 or later, records are right there. They're very clean and concise. I like using them. So I guess just use whatever you're productive with. I happen to like records, but if you like Lombok, there's no reason to get rid of it. Chris says, appreciate you guys taking the time to talk and guide us. Thank you, Chris. Yeah, that's what we're here for.
Thank you.
Got one more from Cloud Surfer. Right now we are sharing Pojo jars, but we want to move away from that.
Yes, I have seen that pattern, and yeah, it can get tricky, it can get messy, with that thing that we're like, oh no, this is the way that we're going to communicate, and here's the pojos. Then you run into like version compatibility problems, and then oh well, we have this common library that we're sharing. Let's just put some more stuff into it, and then we start, yeah. How many ways can we communicate via pojo? So
Right.
I've been down that path, and you'll see it everywhere. But yeah, sometimes that API, and I think this is where you're getting to. Like maybe I don't want to have to share this Pojo. I'll just share the API, and then I have something that can convert that JSON into whatever language it is, right? Whether it's Java or other, and that's the way that you're going to share it. So as long as you're consuming that API, you can generate, so you don't have to have that library pulled in. Maybe you don't need all of the Pojos. So I get that as being deleting code is always fun, right? That's always more productive. Deleted code yields no bugs. So I understand the path that you're going down.
Trying to find something here.
Oh, while he's doing that, hey, we got another thumbs up. Alex, thank you for the continued support. We really appreciate you joining in and all the feedback you've shared along the way. So yeah, thanks. We appreciate you showing up. We have a question about how is Project Loom coming along? This is a good question. I know there's a lot of people excited about it, but I don't have any inside track on that. But I do have Slack. Maybe I'll ask and see what the status is, see if I can share in a later show.
Yeah, I was just trying to find I just had it somewhere. Here's Project Loom. Here's the online docs. Yeah, I'll have to find it. I know I mentioned this earlier, but Project Loom was basically now targeted for Java 19 as experimental. So it's coming. What is Java 19? I think. I'm not sure. So it's coming later this year, Project Loom. I think somebody brought this up, DaShaun, because I was looking at a thread. Let me go ahead and share my screen again. So in Josh's This Week in Spring, he mentioned this Twitter thread that Ben Hale was on. And I know you weren't here last week, but there was an awesome discussion on the Cloud Native show with Cora and Josh and Ben. And this did come up, and one of the questions was like, hey, with Project Loom coming and virtual threads, does Reactive go away? And so I think a lot of people, including myself, are going to start asking that question. But this thread was really good, and Ben kind of broke it down and basically said, hey, they're two things solving two different problems. So as along with DaShaun, I don't know much more about it. It's something that I gotta get into, but that if you're gonna listen to anyone, listen to Ben.
That's sage advice right there.
All right, I think we got another one here. When to use Hibernate, jOOQ, any mental model that you guys have before you start using an external persistence layer instead of direct JDBC? Great question.
I have strong opinions on this. I want to let you go first because I have a very, very strong opinion based on experiences, but I'll let you go first.
Okay, yeah, mine's pretty simple. I'll let you kind of get into it. Mine is pretty simple. Like it's up to you and the team that you're working with on what their skill set is. Like if nobody knows JPA and you have a 10-person team, why are you training 10 people to use JPA? What are the advantages there? I don't know of any. If you can get away with using straight JDBC, then use it. I mean, you're not going to use low-level JDBC. There's abstractions on Spring for that. So use that. But if you have, a team that knows Hibernate and knows JPA, you can take advantage of that and get a lot out of that. So I happen to be a big fan of Hibernate and JPA. I don't. I know what jOOQ is, jOOQ. I've never used it, but again, probably for that same reason. It was one of those things I just didn't learn, so I didn't use it. But that's kind of my initial thoughts.
Yeah, that definitely is the start. Whatever your team is using right now, if you've got a bunch of JPA in the building already, go with JPA. If you've got a bunch of jOOQ in the building, or jOOQ, however you want, I've been calling it jOOQ. However you want to get started, start with where you are. If everything is already JDBC, start there. My assumption has always been that the JPA route is the easiest path to MVP. So I always assumed and shared, this is my strong opinion, go with what's going to get you the furthest, the fastest. And for me and the community, I've always seen that JPA route is the easiest one for us as Spring developers to comprehend. The least amount of mistakes. And that's going to be the one. And I never would recommend going down to the JDBC direct approach until I needed to, right? I can build out a ton of stuff before I run into a contention problem or a read versus write problem, until to need to go down to that level where I can optimize my queries even more. But the further we get with JPA, the better it is at understanding the ecosystem, and a lot of times separating the databases out really helps. If you're following that microservice approach and you don't have a bunch of different systems writing to the same database, then you can eliminate a lot of the problems that might require you to go to direct JDBC. So that's my opinion, is go with whatever will get you the furthest, the fastest, and then look for changes later, but don't gold plate prematurely.
It's great advice. And if you're in the Spring world, Spring Data is a great place to start because it kind of provides a consistent programming model based on whatever you're using. So if you're using Spring Data JPA and Hibernate's behind that, you can always move to, or if you're using JDBC, you can move to JPA. But there's a consistent programming model along those projects, which is nice. So if you haven't used Spring Data JDBC yet, again, it's just another abstraction on top of that, but allows you to, create these repositories, and you get all of the CRUD methods for free. But guess what? You still get to write straight SQL. So if you don't know JQL and JPA, that's a really good place to start. So I would suggest checking out Spring Data JDBC. And then if, again, as DaShaun said, if you have JPA in-house, check out something like Spring Data JPA.
Excellent. Thank you all for the questions. This is what we are hoping to do with this office hours. Sometimes it's hard to find the right people to ask the right questions, and we want to make this a place for you to bring all of your questions. Nothing too complex or too 100 level. Bring them all. We want to get you unstuck as much as possible. And if we don't have the answer, at least we'll know enough and have two different perspectives to talk about it, and we can take it offline. Like I said, we've got Slack. We can go and find the people that have the right answers, and we'll bring them back here to office hours.
All right, I just want to share this. Thanks to Alex for posting this, but here is the JEP 425. So JEPs in the Java world, if you don't know, stands for Java Enhancement Proposals. This is where, they kind of throw something out like, hey, this is a new feature that we want to work on, get a bunch of feedback in and kind of go through it. I read through this a couple weeks ago when I saw that it was being targeted for 19. And this is just a really good JEP to go through because it talks about, hey, here's the motivation behind why we're doing this. Here's the implication of virtual threads. And then it goes through like just very detailed what's going on with virtual threads and, what the problem is with the servlet model, with the, with the thread per request style. So if you get a chance and you're not up to date with what's going on with Loom, this is a really good place to start.
I just posted the link for the Cloud Native Crew episode that had Ben Hale.
Cool. Yeah, that was awesome. I was watching it live. I was on vacation and all the kids were sleeping, and I was just sitting there at the laptop with nothing to do, and I hung out with them, and it was a great conversation. So yeah, that was awesome.
Excellent. Good stuff. When are we going to do this next?
I don't know. Recommend any good forums. So I don't know about a forum. I'm on Twitter these days. There's a Spring developer community that we started on there, so you could start there. Stack Overflow if you have specific questions. I don't know of like one central place though. This is a good forum. This is a great forum for questions. So show up here and ask your questions here. But yeah, I don't know. I mentioned at the top of the show, this is our first episode officially. We have a little bit of branding going on. We're working on some branding for like the show itself here in StreamYard. And this is just going to get better and better. But I said this is probably not the greatest time for our friends on the other coast or even worldwide. So we may want to have like an earlier show on Monday and maybe a later show later on in the week. So I think you and I can get together and kind of talk about that. But the other thing I said is this is really, we're hosting this show, but I think we've set this show up for anyone to really come on and take the show over. We have a specific format. So we go through the news, we show any demos you want to show off, and we take questions. So I think that, if I'm out 1 week or you're out 1 week, we can always either do this ourselves or have somebody else come on. So.
Yeah, let us know. Let us know if there's times that work better for you or reasons or days that work better. Let us know because we're here. The show is about you and your schedule. We want to make it so that you guys can get unlocked. Yeah, we'll make adjustments and thanks for joining the journey.
Alex had a question here. Spring merch, ? This is something I've been talking with the Spring marketing team on. I want personally I would buy this stuff. So I wouldn't even ask for it for free. If you give me some polos with the Spring logo on it or some shirts, yes, we need to find a way to get some more Spring merch. I will keep talking to the marketing team and see what we can come up with. I know if you're going to be, yeah, I know if you're going to be out at Spring 1 in December, I know there'll be some merch there. I don't know what or how much, but I know.
Also Spring 1 tour, right? We give away lots of Spring merch at the Spring 1 tour. So if there's a location near you, be sure to head that way.
Go ahead.
That's exclusive
Spring merch.
Right. T-shirts that are unique to each location.
Let's talk about this. DaShaun was just in Chicago. I had to miss Chicago, which sucked, but DaShaun was in Chicago. That went well. We have Toronto coming up June 7th through the 8th. And where are we at in Toronto? Vantage Venues on King Street in Toronto, Ontario. We already have a schedule up on that. So 2 days of amazing content from all your favorite springers. And then, there's a whole tour going on. New York, Seattle, Atlanta, Amsterdam. So much fun.
Yeah, maybe
and then all followed up by Spring 1 in December. I forgot to tell you, DaShaun, I have some great news about Spring 1. I can't tell everybody else, but I'm going to tell you later.
Okay.
Hopefully I can share that with everyone later.
Robin Tom, how do you think GraalVM and native executables help existing Spring applications? You're talking to me like this is something I'm passionate about. And I have strong opinions. One of the things that I see is this path forward where we are now going to be doing a lot more, especially now that we're distributed. We're going to be doing a lot more on our little humble laptops that I'm sitting in front of, for example. Let's say that this audience, there's a handful of us watching and we're all working on our next big project. What would be nice is if I could have all of those microservices running on my laptop, but scaled to zero, like scaled down. So I'm not using the greeting service right now, but when I do need it, it would be nice if it was there and it had that fast startup time running on something like Knative serving, where I could, as I needed it, it'll stand up and it'll consume a smaller footprint, but give me the performance that I need in order to get through my end-to-end tests. It might not be the best use case for what's running in production. Each application is going to have pros and cons for how it's going to be deployed. Not every application lends itself to a GraalVM native executable, but at least during development, for those times where I'm going to scale up, scale down, I see a path forward where on my development environment, I've got hundreds of microservices running, but they're scaled to zero and they're all native executable. They're all compiled as those native binaries, but they're all just available. So for me in my development, my developer experience, I have all the things. I'm never having to go back and pull things down. I can have literally all these services that are running in our entire portfolio. I can have them all available on my laptop as these Spring native executables. And that's going to be even more baked in. Today it's Spring native, but that'll be baked in with Spring Framework 6 and Spring Boot 3 that is coming up later this year. So hopefully that answered your question. I think it's going to be a big part of, at a minimum, the developer experience, but then also as we get into the cloud and we're constantly being asked to do more with less, there's going to be some of these services that would benefit from a smaller footprint. They'd benefit from that ability to scale up and have those fast startup times. There's going to be cases where we can fit more services into less infrastructure and save on just dollars and cents. So yeah, it's definitely going to be a part of the ecosystem going forward.
Yeah, I think, from a serverless standpoint, it's going to be really big. A lot of my front ends that I work on are all HTML, CSS, JavaScript. They're separated from my Spring apps. I used to write, one large Spring app that had time leaf and, everything was bundled together. But more and more, like, you want to be able to change the front end faster and make changes faster without having to redeploy things. So, a lot of clients now, like if I just want some simple functionality that I can write in Java, I would turn that into a Lambda function. So like, say I wanted to go out and collect the number of, say, YouTube subscribers I had and display it on my website. That's not a full application, hosted somewhere. That's just one little particular function that I need hosted. And I can write that in Java, and I can write that in Spring, and I can use Spring Native and make this a very small footprint and start up really fast, which works well on things like AWS Lambda or Google Cloud Function. And so, yeah, so I've been having some fun with that, and maybe I'll put some demos together for that in the coming future.
Excellent. Bring the questions. We're going to wrap up here in a minute, but yeah, this is the point. At the end of the session, we want you to bring your questions. Mod Danish, hopefully I said that right. Correct me if I'm wrong. Good toolings for monorepo in Java with Maven. This topic has actually come up quite a few times. I've heard over the last couple of weeks, this idea of the monorepo, and Maven has its own concept of what that might look like with its parent-child relationships on the projects. But additional tooling, I don't know that we offer anything in the Spring ecosystem around that, but I have seen a lot of these nested projects, monorepo style projects out in the wild. How about you, Dan?
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add to that. Same thing. I've seen them here and there, but I guess monorepo. So for me, there's a couple different, there's a couple different definitions of that. Are you talking about, I just want one repo for all of my different services, or is this a monorepo where you're talking about the front end and the back end? Because I've done a lot with the front end and the back end, and do I just want to put everything into one single repo, or do I want to split that out and have them talk to each other? So I guess I'm just not sure of the question.
Yeah, I think when I hear monorepo, I think of that day one experience for a developer. They come in, they've got one repo to check out. It has all of
Yep.
the things, anything they're going to see in their ticket list, their backlog. They have all of the things. They have access to all the latest and greatest in one repository. That's what I
That
think of.
makes sense.
I think monorepo. So the front end is in there, the back end is in there, all the connectivity is in there. That's what I picture, and organizing that. Has its own headaches and its own I'll say ecosystem on how to best organize a monorepo for development at scale. When I think of that, I think it matters. The more distributed, the larger your team, the more distributed your team, there's more benefits that you can get from that. But it's a trade-off. Everything's a negotiation on whether it should be a monorepo or multiple repositories.
Yeah, and I think from monorepo too, is it just a collection for you as a developer, or on the flip side, is it going to be one asset when we go ahead and build our image? Because that's what I've worked with as far as I've done a bunch with full stack, Java and Vue, and hey, do we want to include all of that front end stuff in the target executable, or do we want that to be separate? So.
Yeah, so we could definitely talk more about that. Hopefully that helped. And also the question on recommend moving to Gradle from Maven. I'll replay one of the earlier threads is what are you running into? Why? Don't just change just to make a change. Some of the benefits that you get from running Gradle on like its caching and how it's doing the builds. I think there's Maven D that kind of covers that section of it. If it's around the DSL that you have for how you're going to do your builds, then maybe that's another question. So it depends. But I would say don't change just to make a change. There's negotiations on both sides.
Great answer. Dan, when you talk about GraphQL next week, can you discuss a way to implement pagination queries? So yeah, we could talk about that. I think just as a general, the one thing that I've been trying to talk to people about when it comes to GraphQL is that GraphQL is independent of your data layer. It does not care what you're doing on the data layer. So when you create a REST API, your controllers are talking to some other data layer like a repository, and the repository is responsible for doing that. On the same sense, GraphQL doesn't care what your data layer is doing. So pagination is handled by the data layer, and then you can kind of just convey those, what you're going to send to the client and those extra variables that they need to paginate with. But again, that's independent of GraphQL. So one more, with respect to pagination, I'd like to see how you pass metadata from the page request object to the client. Okay.
Excellent. This is good stuff. Thank you,
Yeah, great.
everybody, for joining. Stay tuned for our next episode. We're still figuring this out, but we're out of beta, so yay for that. And just stay tuned. We will address as many of these as possible in our next session. But again, we have other places for you to go with your questions. The Spring community on Twitter. I posted the link earlier. There's always the Git repositories, and and direct us on Twitter. Feel free.
Yeah, and DaShaun, I mentioned something earlier, and I said I'd talk to you. I don't want to put my foot in my mouth, but this seems more like a podcast episode where we might want to have some show notes, even if it's just very simplified. Like, here's some links to the things that we talked to in this episode, so that you can come back to the Tanzu TV show over here in our Tanzu Developer Center and take a look at what we talked about. So I'll work on getting those together.
Great idea.
Cool. All right. With that, we'll call it. Episode 1 is done. Thank you so much for coming. Thanks, DaShaun. And we'll see you in the next episode.